Talk the big picture. There's a lot of change facing the Navy, and a lot of people assume there's going to be change. Some maybe want different change than you want. And maybe we'll get to some nitty gritty, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll have made a whole lot of screaming headlines for all the journalists to write today.
I avoid the headlines.
well, that's my mission today. First of all, I wanted to note, I watched your confirmation hearing and some of your early speeches, and there's a line in your hearing where you said, "I know the value of freedom and democracy because I was born in a country with neither." Where were you born?
I was born in Havana, Cuba, in 1961.
How does that affect the kind of Navy secretary you're going to be? And that may sound pithy, but you have a unique background, a unique beginning, a unique family story, and it comes at this moment in American history where diversity and inclusion is forefront in everything, even in the Pentagon.
I think it has a tremendous effect on my conduct as Secretary of the Navy. And I would argue that all immigrants who come to this country perhaps sometimes view life and the challenges that we face as a nation through a slightly different lens. And so, for example, as I look at what President Biden has clearly made our pacing threat, and Secretary Austin talks about it so much, China, being born in a communist country gives you a different perspective. You do lose all your freedoms. And you come to the realization that communist countries, generally speaking, have one main goal, and is that the self-preservation of power, to keep their own communist party in power and to control their own people. And so having had that life perspective for me is very educational in how I see the relationship between China and the United States and Russia and other nations.
I take it when you hear politicians throw the word around like socialist, it has a different meaning for you.
Well, there are elements of socialism that are good. However, when they're exercised in the way that communist countries exercise socialism, that's not a good thing. And because it typically means that communist countries are trying to gain control of their people and their freedoms in every possible way to their own advantage and to the detriment of the people that they rule.
Let's talk about the future of the Navy, and I have a lot of notes on my phone, so forgive me. I'm actually not tweeting for 30 minutes, which is rare for me, but we'll get to the tweets. You're the 78th
Yes.
Navy Secretary. In the last administration, there were 5.
Yes.
We went through Richard Spencer, who was fired, Thomas Maudley resigned in controversy, McPherson, Braithwaite, Thomas Harker, and then finally to you. When did you have your first conversation with someone from the Biden team about taking this job?
I had my first conversations with the Biden team around the March timeframe.
Yeah.
And they reached out to me about the possibility of filling the shoes of Secretary of the Navy.
So you came on board kind of right when the budget was just about to drop already.
Yes.
So this budget predates you. And the NDAA that governs it is we don't know when it's going to drop or going to be passed, but it's fairly underway. So do you have any chance to put input into the current NDAA in the next budget coming out?
I had an opportunity certainly to talk to all our senators through my confirmation hearing process. And I also had opportunities to talk to the administration as well about the ongoing efforts that were in place in discussion of the fiscal year 22 budget, as well as the 23 POM. Yeah. This is my 12th week, so right. My first 4 weeks were, quite frankly, consumed by Afghanistan, all things Afghanistan. I did have about 2 weeks to put my own imprint on the Navy POM that had to be submitted. So I feel like I've been able to weigh in, at least initially, and to affect the priorities that I think the Department of the Navy needs moving forward.
Tell us the state of all of the Navy's plans and doctrines and studies, because there are a lot of them going on, and I'll review for the audience here some of them. In September Defense One, we hosted your counterpart, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Gilday, who said that it might not be till 2023 that the Navy gets its next real new fleet plan, because the fleet plan that flows from a force study design, which would be the Navy's 4th in recent years, it follows the 2019's Integrated Naval Force Structure Assessment, Battle Force 2045, which was completed October of last year. This year earlier was the Biden administration put out a shipbuilding document, and we're all waiting for DoD to come out with a global posture review for the entire force laydown, which we've heard from Admiral Gilday thought at least that has to be informed by a new national defense strategy, which has to be informed by a national security strategy from the White House. So How far away are we from any real change for the Navy?
Well, there's lots of studies and lots of strategies out there that are being developed. However, they are in many ways interlinked and intertwined and quite consistent with each other, quite frankly. In the Department of the Navy, I largely guide myself by the Commandant of the Marine Corps Force Design 2030 and the Chief of Naval Operations Navigation Plan. And I've studied those both quite extensively. I think they're pretty sound documents. We've been putting them into effect over the last couple of years. My desire is to, quite frankly, to be able to resource them properly so that we can actually bring them into fruition and execute on them over the course of the fit-up.
I want to ask about the resources, but before then, so you've read those documents, you've gotten your feet wet in the Navy. Philosophically, why does this nation need a Navy? What is the purpose of the modern Navy, given the state of the world today, the threat assessments that you're reading, all these documents that you've gone through?
Well, the purpose of the Navy hasn't changed much, actually, since the days of the Constitution. It's really to protect our nation's economic interests and our national security interests, to be able to maintain the sea lanes of communications and trade open globally. As you all know, over 85% of our nation's trade, those packages that you receive at your home from Amazon, much of that actually begins in places overseas and it's transported over the seas to our country where it's delivered to your front doorstep. And there's also the digital trade that takes place internationally as well too. That takes place through cables and fiber lines underseas that we protect globally.
So give us your priorities. You've put out a strategic guidance, as lots of new officials do when they first come in. It's a short document, but you call it your 4 C's, right?
I do. It starts with China as our most significant pacing threat. China's intent to one day take over Taiwan, either peacefully or through military means, has the most serious impact on our economic security of this country and for the destabilization of the global economy, for that matter. So they are the pacing threat, and they are our number one threat that we have to pay attention to. That doesn't mean that we don't take our eyes off the many other threats that exist, including those presented by Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and many other countries, and the terrorist threat that always is relevant everywhere around the world as well. But China is unquestionably the most significant threat. That's followed by attention to culture in the Navy, which I find it's very important to maintain a culture of dignity and respect for all our sailors and Marines and civilian personnel who serve in the Navy. Climate as well, that presents an existential threat to our national security in many different ways. And then COVID as well too. And I'm proud to say that with regards to COVID, the Navy today is 99.4% vaccinated, which is a tremendous number. And our Marine Corps is very close to 95% vaccinated now. So hopefully I could start talking about perhaps the 3 C's.
Exactly, and get rid of COVID. That'd be nice. I'll ask you about COVID. Today, we have breaking news just before we came on stage. The Biden administration is delaying its requirement that federal contractors be vaccinated until January 4th. The deadline was going to be next week, I believe. And it's significant because we had reported that couple of shipyards, at least in Marinette and at Groton, had said that back in like September or so that they thought that maybe only 50% of shipbuilders in their yards were vaccinated. And more recently, at one of the other shipyards, I think Bath, they said that they'd gotten up to 70%. But in reality, they were facing the option of either laying off or firing thousands of shipyard workers. So how significant is this delay, and could you also speak to this, just the general state of American shipbuilding? There's a sense that I don't want to mention the 355 ship Navy because it becomes a trope that people hang their politics on.
You could mention it.
But how is this country going to be able to expand any kind of shipbuilding or Navy with the shipbuilding capacity that we have today?
Sure.
Doesn't the United States need vastly more capacity for shipbuilding?
So let me address the first question with regards to COVID in the shipyards. So I think this is something that we'll be able to very effectively work through. It's a little bit more complicated, obviously, in the private sector for our contractors and our shipyards. But I think that they're really making great attempts to try to educate their workforce that, it just simply makes sense to get vaccinated. It's a matter of health security for themselves, and the health security of our own Department of the Navy workforce as well too. So I feel confident that delaying it till January is not a major issue. It'll allow us a little bit of extra time to sort of work through the legal details and many other details that the shipyards and other contractors need to work through in order to get to the right place in time. And over time, I do feel confident that those percentages of vaccinations will go up significantly, just like they did in the Department of the Navy. So I don't think it's a major issue, quite frankly.
Well, go ahead.
Would you like me to talk about the? Okay. So today, China has 17 shipyards throughout all of China. They're building. They built last year. They built 20 Navy warships. This year, they're on track to build another 20 Navy warships. It's a significant threat, and so when we look at our shipbuilding capability, I am concerned that we need to make greater investments in shipbuilding in order to get us to par with 2018 NDAA. Basically, they called for 355 ships, which is a desirable goal for the Department of the Navy, obviously. In order to get there, we're going to have to increase resources by at least 3 to 5% over inflation. And that would be an honorable goal for the Department of the Navy to be able to do so.
Right. I mean, that's the current law. You've said in your Annapolis speech that the United States needs urgency with keeping up the pace with China. 20 ships a year. The United States is not keeping up that pace. Is the U.S. or is Congress acting with enough urgency?
Well, I think we're raising the alarm, certainly.
Yeah.
And I think more members of Congress understand the real threat that China presents, not just to our national security, but our economic security. I think they'll become more willing to invest more in the Department of the Navy, both the Navy and the Marine Corps.
A couple hardware items to ask about, on the same vein. One is on destroyers. You commanded a destroyer.
I did.
And so, and I think I heard you say you lived at a shipyard while it was being built, right?
I did. I spent 3 years, a year and a half in the shipyard building the USS Bulkley in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and I spent a year and a half on sea trials. So
Bath Iron Works has said that it would have to cut 2,400 shipbuilding jobs before the year 2024 if the Navy doesn't place a large long-term order for more of those ships. Mm-hmm. How do you respond to that? Is that an honest, is that just an honest presentation of the facts, or is that a typical big defense contractor just trying to put the squeeze on the Pentagon?
I served in the private sector for 17 years, and so it was important for companies to clearly understand what the demand signal is moving forward. But in the case of Bath, Maine, I'm quite confident that we'll be seeing multi-year procurements in the future in support of building our DDG class of destroyers that will support a continued stable workforce at Bath and also at Pascagoula.
Similar question, the future of the FA-18s. Production is set to close in 2024. The Navy has requested to end this before your tenure, to move on to other aircraft. But Congress, the House, at least in the NEH, wants to put in $1 billion more to buy more, and there might be foreign purchases as well. If Super Hunter production ends, what risk does that bring to, for example, carrier groups in the Pacific? Sure.
Well, it's shutting down the F-18 ENF line basically for future aircraft in the Department of the Navy is a decision made in order to be able to support the future purchases of the F-35B, which is a far more significantly capable aircraft that we're looking at for operational use in the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere to be able to meet the significantly increasing capabilities of the Chinese. So it does have a negative impact in a world where often budgets don't grow at a pace that you'd want them to grow. So it's a trade-off basically and a balance that you have to make between those two, which is why the Navy has been pushing so hard for more purchases of the F-35B and C.
Are you staying with that approach? You're still calling for the end of the 18s?
Yeah, I support the president's current budget and the decision that was made in this case.
We're already with 7 minutes to go, which drives me crazy. But we have within the last 5 minutes, I'll call us on some questions. If you have some, get them ready, get your hand up, and microphones will come your way. China, I didn't mean to skip over it earlier. You mentioned, with 20 ships a year coming out, the answer probably is not to try to match them ship for ship. It's going to have to be something else. What do you envision? I mean, what are your early thoughts on the type of Navy, the priorities that you're going to need to check down China's competitiveness?
And that's exactly correct. It's not just about the number of ships, it's about the capacity that they bring, the capability that they bring to the table, the lethality that they bring, and we obviously want to be able to build the most modern ships that we can, right, while maintaining some of the legacy ships that we have to be able to fight the conflict should it present itself in the next 2 to 3 years, for example. So it's a balance between all of those together. And my hope is that we can maintain a stable capacity to be able to meet the threat over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, and then make major investments in modernization so that we can make them that more capable. So if you take the Zumwalt class of ship, for example, major investments that we're making in hypersonic missiles, by being able to convert the VLS tubes on the Zumwalt class of ships, that prevents a really formidable deterrent to China in the next 5 to 6 years.
The USS Constitution submarine in the news lately for hitting something, reportedly a seamount underwater in the South China Sea. What can you tell us that's happened and what's happening with that?
The Connecticut. I was a little worried. You said that the USS Constitution.
Did I say the Constitution? I meant the Connecticut. Constitution is probably safe in Boston still.
That's right. That's right. Yes, the Connecticut, as has been broadcast, had hit a uncharted seamount. An investigation is underway, and I really can't comment more until the investigations are complete. But I'm confident that the investigations will determine if individuals need to be held accountable, and if they do need to be held accountable, they will be held accountable.
All right, last question for the audience. Special operations after Afghanistan. There's some concern in this community that the good news is there's less conflict, less combat, less battlefield danger, but that also means less experience to be had and a different kind of training that's needed for special operators like Navy SEALs to be ready and able for a whole new generation of them, frankly, to have the same sort of capability and readiness. Do you have any thoughts, or have you given thought to what kind of shift needs to happen and what effect really the end of Afghanistan operations has, if it's as much as or less as people may think, on the churn of naval special operations and training and capabilities?
Well, with the focus on 20 years of land warfare, basically in the Middle East, to deterring China in the Indo-Pacific, which is very much a maritime and Air Force dominated theater, all our warfare specialties are shifting basically to how they contribute to the fight in the Indo-Pacific and deterring China in every possible way, and that includes our special forces as well too. But after all the work that they've done in the Middle East, they are extremely proficient at what they do. It's just a matter of shifting their operations now to the Indo-Pacific and to a slightly different operational requirement for them to be able to effectively do their mission. And without going into too many details, I assure you that we're doing that.
Culture is one of your C's. Are you planning any types of new dives into Navy SEAL culture?
No, I mean, culture for me really is about treating every individual with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are, their religion, the color of their skin, their gender, who they care to love, or anything else. We are professionals in the Department of the Navy and the Department of Defense, and we have a requirement to treat each other with dignity and respect as professionals. That equates directly to combat readiness, because in combat and in conflict, people have to be able to trust each other. And part of that trust is treating each other with dignity and respect. So for me, it's a standard of excellence by which we have to live by every single day and hold people accountable who choose not to. Okay, rapid fire questions. So audience members, we have a hand right here in the front. If there's a microphone coming your way. We have a couple minutes. Maybe we can get 2 or 3 if there's others. Sure. We'll keep them quick.
Thanks for joining us, Mr. Secretary. My name is Jack Hanley. I'm one of the ASG Rising leaders and a U.S. Navy Surface Warfare Officer. Sir, I wanted to ask you a question about the recent report on the fighting culture in the Surface Navy, and kind of piggybacking on what you've been talking about, our war fighting culture and some of the shortfalls we've been seeing. Your comments on the report, sir, and then what we can do to help improve that culture. Thank you.
Yeah. So I believe we have a very strong warfighting culture in the Department of the Navy. You know, today, just in the Department of the Navy, we have 135,000 sailors and Marines deployed globally. That's a higher number than we've had actually since 2014. It's extraordinary. And I just came back from a 10-day trip to the Indo-Pacific, for example, where I visit destroyers, submarines, aircraft carriers. I went on the Japanese converted destroyer Izumo, for example. And you know, the warfighting culture that we have, I think, is extraordinary. It really has. And yes, we did have some very unfortunate accidents that took place 5 years ago. And you know, the Navy, the surface Navy in this case, invested millions of dollars actually into improving their training in Newport, Rhode Island, their simulators. There were a lot of in-depth studies that were done. We've increased actually the number of personnel on our destroyers, for example. The training that takes place for executive officers and commanding officers has really been reinforced. I've taken a very close look at this in the last 8 weeks or so, and I'm really impressed with the investments that we made. I'm proud of the warfighting culture that we have, and I'm confident that the Department of the Navy will be able to stand up and fulfill its mission to the American people.
One more question in the far corner, the woman with glasses, yes. And that'll have to be it with our last time.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Secretary. Because we're so glad to see you here today. I want to follow up on the 4 C's that you've been talking about, specifically climate. And when I look at climate challenges, I really think about the Navy. I think about the North Pole area and the challenges there. Could you go into a little bit more depth or point us in the direction on who we can go to within your organization? Because industry wants to help. We just need to know what you want, need, and how we can support you. So the focus is climate. What is the Navy going to do, and what can the American industrial base do to help you? Thank you.
Well, in case I can't answer all your questions in 1 minute, the person to go to is actually the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Meredith Berger, for energy installations and the environment. And our Navy team is actually doing a great job trying to make the right investments, technological and otherwise, to be able to lower our carbon footprint, for example, to make technological advancements on our platforms at sea, but also ashore as well too. Both those require some major investments over the course of the next few years. And it's just critically important. If you just take the cybersecurity building that was built at the Naval Academy recently, for example, that building was completely designed with the environment in mind. And if you just take a look at the fact that the Severn River flooded just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or in the last 2 weeks, we can continue to operate that building because of the engineering designs that we put into it to keep it functional even when the Severn floods over into the Naval Academy. So there's a lot of exciting technologies that we're looking at across the board, and I really do encourage you to reach out, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with the Assistant Secretary to continue that conversation. But without question, the biggest threat that we face with regards to climate is the shortage of fresh water globally, and the rising conflicts that the fight for fresh water will create between nations, and we have to find a way. It's not a military solution. Diplomacy and many other things that have to come into play, a whole of government approach to address these very serious concerns so that they don't result in conflicts around the world.
Secretary Del Toro, Aspen audience, thank you very much. We are already at our time, but we look forward to seeing much more of you in your
Thank you so much, sir. It's great to be here. Thank you.